LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the October 21st edition of LiberalViewer Monday Media Mixup. It's actually episode 177. I messed up on the title page there. Thanks for joining me and Chong the cat, who definitely wants to get down at this point. We'll be using the 12 best, most newsworthy clips I picked out from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for what should be a really informative, educational, fair use, media criticism, and political commentary show for you all today. As you can see from the title of the video, my main topic is Donald Trump's dementia disinhibition. And what does that mean? What is dementia disinhibition? Well, several types of dementia have a symptom, and I'm not a doctor, and doctors, in order to make a diagnosis, have to examine the patient. So this is, political commentary, and it's actually important, as I'm about to explain to you. People who start experiencing dementia, they get what's called disinhibition. Things that they used to be able to stop themselves from doing, self-control, behavioral control, that kind of thing. They stop being able to do that as well, or stop being able to do it at all. They start saying things they wouldn't otherwise say. And there's a lot of evidence that whether it's dementia or some other reason, that Donald Trump is becoming more and more disinhibited. He's saying things he doesn't even mean to say. And Saturday, I was actually watching this live, like 10 minutes delayed. I was watching a live stream about 10 minutes behind of Donald Trump's speech in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, at some airport hangar outside of town. And he started off with this long story about Arnold Palmer, which by itself was seemed like something an old man might tell you while you're barely listening or something. And then at the end, he said something that was it was shocking. I couldn't even believe he said it all. And I included a couple parts of this so you might not have seen if you've already seen the clip. But I will talk about that a little more after we watch the end of the Arnold Palmer story. This is just the last minute and 20 seconds of the 12-minute rambling story about Arnold Palmer in Pennsylvania from Trump. And this is my political comedy. It's so shocking, but it's also disturbing for reasons I'll talk about after we watch it together over here.
Arnold Palmer was all man, and I say that in all due respect to women, and I love women. But this is a guy that was all man. His man was strong and tough, and I refuse to say it, but when he took showers with the other pros, they came out of there, they said, "Oh my God, that's unbelievable." I had to say it. We have women that are highly sophisticated here, but they used to look at Arnold and say, "Man," but he was really something special. Arnold was something special. So I just want to tell you, you're very lucky, the people that live in Latrobe, and it's an honor for me to be here because of him. And he was he was a great man, and I don't think there would be golf to the extent that you have it today. It probably wouldn't be that way without the great Arnold Palmer. So enjoy it, everybody. Enjoy it. And I had to tell you the shower part of it because it's true. What can I tell? We want to be honest. We want to be upfront. It's true.
Because, Donald Trump is known for his honesty. That's his brand. But you see there at the end, he's kind of feeling like he said something he shouldn't have said. He's trying to justify why he told that shower story. And right before he says it, there was a weird turn of phrase where "I refuse to say." He says, "I refuse to say," in the back of his head. He's telling himself, "I'm not going to say this," but he does say it. Or I don't know. That was just weird. And I mean, they talked about the Trump-Vance team being a weird ticket, but that was a weird story. And just why did he say that? I mean, maybe it's to take focus off all the times he keeps saying that the Democrats like Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff are the enemy within? And in some ways, that's also, or I saw on like Morning Joe on MSNBC this morning, they kept hammering on how that was the more disturbing thing, not the whole Arnold Palmer story. But a president, if he really does have dementia, disinhibition, where he like can't control his impulses, that is incredibly dangerous in a president, just as dangerous as someone saying enemy within, especially combined with a presidential candidate who says he wants to use the military on his political opponents who he considers the enemy within. So that's also scary. And then in terms of the political comedy aspect of it, I have to say that I did a search on the CNN State of the Union transcript, and the word penis appears 5 times. That's unusual. That's unusual for the CNN State of the Union. Usually the answer to that question is 0, and it led to this kind of amusing cross-examination. I'm going to show you Jake Tapper's cross-examination of Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, both on the topic of the Arnold Palmer story, and then on the what some say is more important, the whole enemy within story. And he does a good job on both, but it's kind of comedic. And by the end of the interview, the next clip I'm going to show you is that Speaker of the House Mike Johnson cross-examination by Jake Tapper. And then the last clip I'm going to show you is the enemy within cross-examination from the same interview. Oh, by the way, down in the video description, if you click on more, you'll see under media mentioned, I have short summaries of all dozen clips I'm using, as well as the sources of all the clips. And it's kind of a funny question, I guess, and funny follow-up, but Jake Tapper's asking, like, in the last 2 weeks of the campaign, when the candidates are supposed to be focusing in on their closing arguments, do you think Trump should be focusing for his closing argument on Arnold Palmer's penis? Over in this clip.
Let's turn to the 2024 race. You heard President Trump's remarks. Let me read you the lead of the Associated Press story about Trump's rally in Pennsylvania. Quote, Donald Trump's campaign suggested he would begin previewing his closing argument Saturday night with Election Day barely 2 weeks away. But the former president kicked off his rally with a detailed story about Arnold Palmer, at one point even praising the late legendary golfer's genitalia, unquote. Mr. Speaker, you're crossing all over the country. You're working hard to get Republicans over the line in this election. You're talking about substantive issues. Is this really the closing message you want voters to hear from Donald Trump, stories about Arnold Palmer's penis?
Well, listen, I think that the headline that I read about the rally in Pennsylvania yesterday was the big question, and it's the one that Kamala Harris has not been able or willing to answer, and that is, are you better off now than you were under the Trump administration 4 years ago? And no one can answer that question with a yes. I mean, no one. And that's why Kamala Harris herself avoids the question. Look, I've been traveling the country nonstop, Jake. I've been in over 230 cities in 40 states right now. And I'm spending these final closing weeks in the swing states, in blue states, in toss-up districts for the House. I'm absolutely convinced. There's an energy out there right now. I'm convinced that we are going to win the White House, the Senate, and the House. And we're going to have a very aggressive agenda to get the economy going again, to help everyone. Look, everywhere I go, Jake, everybody has the same concerns. They're fed up and they're fired up about the cost of living that's unaffordable now, and the rising crime rates everywhere, and the weakness on the world stage, and the wide open border. And they know that Kamala Harris is responsible for those things. And they know that President Trump is offering alternatives. So put the rhetoric aside, look at the record of these two candidates. This shouldn't be about personalities, it should be about policy. And I think people are looking at that seriously, and that's why I'm convinced we're going to win.
I'm sure that you think that a policy debate would be better than a personality debate, but if President Biden had gone on stage and spoke about the size of a pro golfer's penis, I think you would be on this show right now saying you were shocked and appalled, and you would suggest it was evidence of his cognitive decline. I wonder how Trump's remarks, not just the one about Arnold Palmer on his, quote, manhood, but everything we've heard from Trump this week, how it fits in with the analysis that the New York Times offered a few days ago. They looked at his speeches from 2015 and 2016 and looked at his speeches today and said, quote, with the passage of time, the 78-year-old former president's speeches have grown darker, harsher, longer, angrier, less focused, more profane, and increasingly fixated on the past. I know you want to talk about policy, and I respect that, but The reason that Donald Trump is not up 10 points is because of comments like that one, where people do have concerns about his fitness, his acuity, and his stability. Why is he talking about Arnold Palmer's penis in front of Pennsylvania voters?
Jake, you seem to like that line a lot. Let me tell you that Donald Trump is doing rallies nonstop around the country.
Let me just say something. I don't want to be talking about this.
Right.
Donald Trump is out there saying it. It is.
But you continue to. Let's talk about.
Because you won't address
Wait a minute.
it.
Hold on.
You won't address it. He is out there talking to
voters. No, I'll address it. Let me answer it. Okay, don't say it again. We don't have to say it. I get it. There's lines in a rally. When President Trump is at a rally, sometimes he'll speak for 2 straight hours. You're questioning his stamina, his mental acuity. Joe Biden couldn't do that for 5 minutes. That's how you started this segment. You said, what if Biden was in a rally like that? He couldn't fill the room. Donald Trump does. You know why? Because they see him as a change agent, and they understand he has a record of performance. In his first administration, we had the greatest economy in the history of the world, Jake, not just the U.S. Everybody's wages were going up. Everybody had more jobs available to them. The pathway out of poverty was widened for more people, and that's what the American people are looking at. We're going to have a demographic shift in this electorate, Jake. There's going to be, when they count the votes and they do the math on the other side of this, I'm convinced you're going to have a record number of Hispanic and Latino voters coming into the Republican Party, a record number of Black and African American voters, record number of Jewish voters and union workers and hardworking families, because they understand the Harris policies have destroyed their family finances. They have made them less safe in their cities. They have a wide open border with illegals and terrorists coming into our country. This is not working for the American people, and they want to change. And that's what they see in Donald Trump. So he has fun at the rallies. He says things that are off the cuff. But I'm telling you, I've been in those events. I've been in those arenas, and people have a great time at those arenas. So you can cherry pick a few words or lines out of a 2-hour event. We could do that with Kamala Harris after a 20-minute event, because she does word salads, and she couldn't hold court like that without a teleprompter. We all know that. These are the facts. The American people see it. And, the media can pick it apart, but people are going to vote. They're going to vote what's best for their family, and they see that in Trump.
So, yeah, and the part about that I found most amusing was that Jake Tapper kept saying Arnold Palmer's penis so many times that Mike Johnson had to say, don't say it. You don't have to say it. Don't say it again. Like, stop saying Arnold Palmer's penis, please. That was my favorite part of that. But also, I thought Jake Tapper did a good job pointing to that New York Times article that did an analysis of Trump's speeches over time and found like this huge decline, increase in profanity, and basically evidence of the possibility of dementia disinhibition or some other type of disinhibition where he just can't stop himself from saying stuff like that. And also, I'm sure like his campaign people are telling him over and over again, please stop saying the Democrats are the enemy within, please, please, please. And he just keeps saying it over, and even when like the people on Fox News try to like get him to clean it up, give him you didn't really mean to say that, you meant, and they won't even, you'll see when I get to the end, Speaker Mike Johnson tries to pretend he's saying something else. I believe he's talking about cleaning up the Venezuelan drug gangs or whatever his stupid way to dodge what Trump is clearly saying Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff are the enemy within, and says something about using the military on them and all sorts of, and I'll get to that part of the news of the clips, but first I'm going to show you the news summaries from longest to shortest. NBC News' Meet the Press with Kristen Welker does have some talk about the enemy within stuff, does not mention the Arnold Palmer thing. It's the only one that doesn't, other than Fox News Sunday, of course, for obvious reasons. That the name Arnold Palmer, I think I heard it mentioned like once on Fox News the last 24 hours. They're like trying to pretend that whole thing didn't even happen on Fox News. Never mind the enemy within stuff. But for Meet the Press, sometimes I get the feeling they like pre-record Meet the Press not on Sunday. Like maybe they did this on Saturday. I don't know. It seems like maybe some of this was done before Trump's rally where he made that comment, but you can let me know know what you think after we watch this longest news summary where Meet the Press does the thing I've been criticizing for weeks, where they spend like, this is over 70 minutes because it includes Steve Kornacki going over the battleground polls and even early voting. Well, early voting, at least that's some news there when he talks about the early voting, and then he goes to the battleground polls, which still tied, too much time spent on it, in my opinion, which you can let me know what you think after we watch that longest news summary. Kristen Welker, Steve Kornacki, over here.
Good Sunday morning. With just 16 days until Election Day, the candidates' closing arguments are starting to take shape. Vice President Harris, who launched her campaign vowing to return joy to politics, is now questioning former President Trump's fitness for office and casting him as a threat to democracy. Former President Trump is intensifying his attacks against his political opponents and coarsening his language in what remains a razor-tight race.
You have to tell Kamala Harris that you've had enough, that you just can't take it anymore. We can't stand you. You're a vice president.
He has no plan for how he would address the needs of the American people. He is only focused on himself. And now he's ducking debates because of exhaustion.
Polling has consistently found that President Biden is a drag on Harris's candidacy, and voters are eager for a new direction. And this morning, NBC News has learned that with just 2 weeks left in the campaign, there are currently no plans for Harris to appear on the trail with Biden before Election Day. The vice president is trying to put space between herself and her boss, while she continues to be pressed on what exactly she would do differently.
My presidency will not be a continuation of Joe Biden's presidency. And like every new president that comes into office, I will bring my life experiences, my professional experiences, and fresh and new ideas. I represent a new generation of leadership.
President Biden said this week that every president has to cut their own path. What is one policy that you would have done differently over these last 3.5 years than President Biden?
I mean, to be very candid with you, even including Mike Pence, vice presidents are not critical of their presidents.
For his part, former President Trump is doubling down on his dark rhetoric.
It is the enemy from within, and they're very dangerous. They're Marxists and communists and fascists, and they're sick. We have China, we have Russia, we have all these countries. If you have a smart president, they can all be handled. The more difficult are, you know, the Pelosi's, these people, they're so sick and they're so evil.
At a town hall of Latino voters on Wednesday, an audience member who identified himself as a Republican pressed Trump on the January 6th attack on the Capitol.
I want to give you the opportunity to try to win back my vote. What happened during January 6th and the fact that, you know, you waited so long to take action while your supporters were attacking the Capitol.
They didn't come because of me. They came because of the election. They thought the election was a rigged election, and that's why they came. Some of those people went down to the Capitol. I said, peacefully and patriotically, nothing done wrong at all. That was a day of love from the standpoint of the millions. It's like hundreds of thousands. It could have been the largest group I've ever spoken before.
Former President Obama is making his closing arguments as early voting gets underway. He campaigned for Harris this weekend in Arizona and Nevada with a message to disaffected Republicans.
Being here in Tucson, I'm thinking about my friend John McCain. I mean, one of the most disturbing things about this election and Donald Trump's rise in politics is how we seem to have set aside the values that people like a John McCain stood for.
Now, Mr. Obama will be in Michigan and Wisconsin on Tuesday before making his first appearance with Harris in Georgia on Thursday. Former First Lady Michelle Obama will join Harris on the trail for the first time on Saturday in Michigan. Early in-person voting began Saturday in Detroit, and both former President Trump and Vice President Harris campaigned in Michigan this weekend. I'm joined now by national political correspondent Steve Kornacki for more on where the race stands. Steve, I know you are looking at the battleground states today.
Yeah, Kristen, and looking at the one you just mentioned, Michigan, look, this is our running average of the polling averages in the battleground states. They're all close, but what's the closest right now? Look at that. Michigan, the average there. Harris, by 1/10 of 1 point. Really doesn't get closer than that. So let's dive into Michigan, what we're going to be looking at in the home stretch and on election night. And the key thing with Michigan, of course, go back to the last election. You just heard from Barack Obama there. Before Donald Trump came on the scene, Barack Obama and the Democrats won Michigan handily. Trump, of course, flipped it barely in 2016, and then it moved a little bit back to the Democrats in 2020. But the key is between 2012 and 2020, the Trump era, the state as a whole got a lot less Democratic. So keeping that in mind, we've split it into 3 categories here. Take a look. One way to think about it. One is, despite the state getting less Democratic, there are 9 counties that got more Democratic in the Trump era. Look at this. From 2012, Barack Obama won this collection of counties by 6. By 2020, it was a 14-point Biden blowout. There's only 9 of them, but they are 1/3 of the state. Each one of these has a higher share of white voters with college degrees than the statewide average. We talk about that a lot as the core Democratic base these days. You see it in these counties you got highlighted here. Next year, these are places where Trump made gains between 2012 2016 and where he held those gains in 2020. And you do see geographically, it's a fair amount of the state, but population-wise, this is only 15% of the state. Some of the movement in some of these counties isn't that significant, but in others, talk about like Genesee County, where Flint is, Democrats were winning by 30 when Obama was the candidate. Now the Democratic margin down to like 10. Can Trump squeeze more out of this population-wise relatively small share of the state? And then this is half the state in terms of where the vote is. These are places where Trump made gains, sometimes big gains in 16, then lost ground in 2020. This, I think, is where the state's going to be won or lost. Look at like Saginaw County here, where the city of Saginaw is. This is sort of a core, swing county. We're going to talk a lot about that on election night. You've got just outside Detroit, Macomb County, the old blue-collar big suburbs of Detroit. Obama won them. Trump won them by double digits in 2016, then gave back ground in 2020. That's a key one. And then the city of Detroit itself in Wayne County, the biggest in the state. Within Wayne County, we're going to be looking at, the city of Detroit and the city of Dearborn. In Detroit, Democrats worried about black voter support, black male voter support for Biden. Going to see Detroit will be a measure of that. In Dearborn, a large Muslim population. We're going to be looking on election night. Is that Israel-Palestine situation affecting the vote there, Kristen?
Yeah, it could potentially loom large over everything. Steve Kornacki, fascinating as always. Thank you.
Thanks.
And joining me now is Republican Senator Lindsey Graham.
And I will have a clip of Senator Lindsey Graham answering one of the questions about Trump being unfit for office based on several former Trump administration officials who have come out to say he's unfit for office. And you'll see Lindsey Graham getting really indignant and yelling about that. And, he doesn't have much of an argument when he starts yelling and doing it, getting all emotional. But that'll be clip 9 if you're looking down at the clip list there. And I have to apologize, in the pre-criticism of that NBC News Meet the Press news summary, I made a couple mistakes. First, I said there wasn't any coverage of the Trump Pennsylvania rally, but actually that first clip they showed of Trump in the news summary was from Latrobe, Pennsylvania, where he called Kamala Harris a shit vice president. They bleeped that for some reason. I don't know why. And maybe it was because they were so worried about the decorum of even showing that clip without bleeping it. Maybe that's why they made an editorial decision not to cover the Arnold Palmer story at all in the whole broadcast, which, it's not only like sensational or, bizarre, but it's, I think it's newsworthy for what it says about what's going on in Trump's head, and whatever it is, it's not good. And I'm actually going to switch up if you're following along on the clip list, which I know nobody actually is, but if you were, you would notice I'm switching up the clip order here because I realized, the other mistake I made, other than not noticing the Latrobe, Pennsylvania clip, was that I said that Steve Kornacki made up for talking too long by actually talking about early voting, which actually is news. But I got that confused with Rick Klein in the ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos news summary. Martha Raddatz and Rick Klein kind of do the same thing you just saw Kristen Welker and Steve Kornacki do, but they do it shorter and in some ways better. So even though that's supposed to be the clip after next, I'm going to show that next to juxtapose that, because these two news summaries are kind of similar, and then the Face the Nation and Fox News Sunday ones are kind of similar in structure. So that was like way too deep in the weeds, kind of like that Steve Kornacki report that I watched it again, and there was just like way too many numbers going by way too fast to really make much of an impression, and mostly because I wasn't sure, like they seem kind of ephemeral, like this is like the snapshot of the moment that I want to know, like what happens after people actually vote, which, like I said, in this ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos news summary, Rick Klein talks about early voting, and I'll talk about that a little more after we watch clip 5 after clip 3 together over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. We are now just 16 days to Election Day, 16 days to one of the most consequential elections in history, with early voting already in full swing. As of this weekend, all 50 states and Washington, D.C. have begun early or absentee voting, with the battleground state of North Carolina setting a new record Friday for its first day of early in-person voting. Both campaigns are crisscrossing all the key swing states, especially the battlegrounds of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania that could very well decide the election. Those so-called blue wall states had gone to Democrats in every presidential election since 1992, but they all went for Donald Trump in 2016 before flipping back to Joe Biden in 2020. Each state won by just a few thousand votes in both of those elections. I traveled to Pennsylvania this weekend to speak with the Democratic governors of these critical states who are on a bus tour making their final case to voters to elect Kamala Harris, with the polls looking tighter than ever. So before we get to that very lively conversation, let's bring in ABC's Washington bureau chief and political director, Rick Klein, with the breakdown of the latest numbers. And Rick, we're already seeing meaningful signs in who's casting those early ballots.
Yeah, Martha, the final day of voting still 16 days away, but already more than 13 million Americans have cast their ballots. Now, that's actually down significantly from where it was 4 years ago. But of course, that was the COVID year when record numbers of people were voting early and by mail. In Georgia, just this past week, the first day of in-person voting set a new record. So it does look like we're on track to have a very high turnout election, particularly in the battleground states. In fact, there's more than 1 million people that have voted early already in both Georgia and Michigan. Now, we're not going to know for a while, till election night or even later than that, exactly who people voted for. But based on the likely partisanship of the voters that we've seen so far, we're seeing more Republicans as a share of the electorate than Democrats. Take a look at that. 4 years ago, less than a third, only 32% of people that had voted so far were Republicans. That's up 6 points so far this cycle. Now, that could be a sign of enthusiasm among Republicans. It could be because Donald Trump is sometimes at least supporting early voting. And it may be that these are voters they're going to vote anyway on Election Day. But the bottom line is that people are voting and they're enthusiastic about this race. In Pennsylvania, we've seen Republicans so far ahead of the 2020 pace. Again, Democrats are still a larger share of early voters, but there are more Republicans in just about all of the states we've seen significant votes so far.
And Pennsylvania, you mentioned, it looms so large in this race, as do those other states. What are you seeing exactly so far in polling, and how important are they?
Yeah, Martha, check out the 538 polling average across the battleground states, 7 major battlegrounds. And that was a month ago, right after the ABC debate. You see the numbers on the left. Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, all advantages for Kamala Harris. Now you've seen, fast forwarding by just a few weeks, things narrow significantly in Michigan and Pennsylvania. And we have a dead even race right now in Wisconsin. Now, this isn't a fundamental shift in the race, but it is enough to put the campaigns on notice about just how close this election is likely to be. And why does this all matter? Well, check out a what-if scenario. This is a potential map for election night. This is a scenario where there's no other surprises, and Harris wins the 3 big blue wall states, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and also takes that 1 congressional district in Nebraska that Biden carried. That's 270 electoral votes. That is the magic number exactly right there that gives her the presidency. But if there's even a slight crack in that blue wall, let's say that Pennsylvania goes for Trump instead, Wisconsin and Michigan still in Harris's column, that allows Trump to open up the Southern strategy. He can win North Carolina and Georgia and take the presidency. He doesn't even have to worry about the 2 states out west in Nevada and Arizona. It's impossible to see, bottom line, Martha, how either candidate does well without doing very well across those 3 big battlegrounds.
And we'll be watching all of this thanks to you, Rick. And those are the kinds of questions I took to those blue wall governors, Pennsylvania's Josh Shapiro, Michigan's Gretchen Whitmer, and Wisconsin's Tony Evers.
So yeah, and actually that looked like it might have been pre-recorded. They did not talk about Donald Trump's weird Arnold Palmer story, but that does come up later in ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. It never came up in Meet the Press. Later, Jonathan Karl gives a little report on both campaigns, including what Trump said about Arnold Palmer. And then I'm even going to have a clip of Governor Chris Sununu being asked about, well, not about the Arnold Palmer thing, but about the enemy within thing. That's part of, I have the Arnold Palmer part you already saw, that I'm going to have the enemy within part, and then the former Trump officials like former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, saying that Trump is unfit for office, fascist to the core. Like, why do all these people who used to work with Trump, even who he picked to work for him, like his chief of staff, John Kelly, National Security Advisor, Secretary of Defense, Mark Esper, of course, his former Vice President, Mike Pence. Why did he have to get a new Vice President? But anyway, I'll get into all of that. I'm like going off on the newsmaker clips, and I haven't even finished the news summaries. Anyway, I just juxtaposed clip 3 and 5 because they both have the host giving some news at the beginning and then going to the pollster. I thought ABC, at least the pollster part, was a lot better because it had the early voting with like that interesting information that there are more Republican early voters than there used to be. And then when they went to the battleground states, I thought Rick Klein's like sort of like top line numbers looking at all the battleground states was a lot more informative than the really deep dive that Steve Kornacki took into like, here's what's happening in Detroit and this, all the different counties. And I don't know, maybe on election night, I'll be more interested in looking at that granular level Steve Kornacki was doing. But anyway, so I juxtaposed those two. Now we're going to juxtapose CBS News's Face the Nation. Margaret Brennan goes to 2 reporters covering the Trump and Harris campaign. And then Fox News Sunday does the same thing. CBS News Face the Nation definitely does it better, including covering Trump's weird behavior in Pennsylvania over in this clip.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation, where we are 2 weeks and 2 days until the election. We begin this morning with Caitlin Huey-Burns, who is with the Trump campaign in Pittsburgh.
Campaigning at an airport hangar near Pittsburgh, former President Trump ramped up his attacks on the current administration and his opponent, Kamala Harris.
This election is a choice between whether we will have a incredible 4 more years of failure. It's such a horrible 4 years. We had a horrible, think of everything they touch turns to.
Trump lost Pennsylvania in 2020, and he wants it back. The state's 19 electoral votes are up for grabs, with CBS News polling showing a dead heat.
We will cut your taxes, demolish inflation, slash your prices, raise your wages, and turn the United States into the manufacturing superpower of the world. The Arnold Palmer.
Trump spent more than 10 minutes off script with an unusual tribute to the legendary pro golfer and Pennsylvanian Arnold Palmer, the namesake of the rally's venue.
This is a guy that was all man. This man was strong and tough. And I refuse to say it, but when he took showers with the other pros, they came out of there, they said, oh my God, that's unbelievable.
And last week, when one potential voter expressed concern about his handling of January 6th, Trump was defiant.
You had hundreds of thousands of people come to Washington. They thought the election was a rigged election, and that's why they came. Some of those people went down to the Capitol. I said, peacefully and patriotically. Nothing done wrong at all, nothing done wrong. But that was a day of love.
Trump is campaigning across Pennsylvania again today, and his comments are providing more fodder for his opponent, Kamala Harris. My colleague Weijia Jiang is traveling with the vice president in the battleground state of Georgia.
Last night in Atlanta, Vice President Harris made an unusual move to call attention to what she says is a Trump administration policy, overturning Roe v. Wade.
Roll the clip.
Harris showed supporters a video telling the story of a pregnant woman whose death after Georgia's restrictive 6-week abortion ban went into effect galvanized abortion rights supporters. Her parents were in the crowd.
I promised Amber's mother that we will always remember her story and speak her name, Amber Nicole Thurman.
And Harris emphasized Trump's role in overturning Roe v. Wade.
Donald Trump still refuses to take accountability.
In Michigan, home to the largest Arab American community in the country, there are concerns from Democrats that Biden administration support for Israel's war in Gaza could cost Harris votes. Last week, she brought up the death of Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar.
Everyone must seize this opportunity to finally end the war in Gaza and end the suffering once and for all.
Not only is Harris focused on Trump's policies, but she's stepped up her attacks on Trump personally, including on his mental fitness.
He's becoming increasingly unstable and unhinged, and it requires that response.
Another Harris challenge, attracting male voters. Former President Obama has been helping to undermine Trump's efforts to win the so-called bro vote.
Some men who seem to think Trump's behavior of bullying people or putting them down is somehow macho sign of strength. I'm telling you, that's not what real strength is. Never has been.
Obama and Harris will finally campaign together for the first time on Thursday. This morning, the vice president is attending a service at this Baptist church and will be participating in events aimed at reaching black voters. Margaret?
That's Weijia Jiang reporting from Atlanta. We go now to Democratic Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock.
And I don't have a clip of Raphael Warnock because I have a clip of Representative Mike Lawler being questioned by Margaret Brennan. But actually, looking on, I think that may be the best of the news summaries. Doesn't really have the polling. I mean, if you want polling, I guess it doesn't have polling. But the two news reports from the two reporters on the two campaigns, I think, gave a good summary of what I've been seeing, watching a lot of cable news, and they didn't really sane wash Trump so much. I mean, that would be my one quibble. They did kind of sane wash him a little. It made it sound like a little less crazy. And, you know, they did have the clip of him on Univision saying that Day of Love, that January 6th was a day of love, but not so much the enemy within stuff. And then they show Kamala Harris saying he's unfit for office, but then they've shown you the stuff that Trump is doing that kind of supports what she's saying, which is not what you see in the next news summary I'm going to show you on Fox News Sunday, going over to clip 6 now, that I want to juxtapose it. This is the same format. First, Shannon Bream gives a few like top headlines of the day, which is her way she's been doing this for the last several months for some reason. And then they have their two reporters, Mark Meredith and Alexendria Hoff, on the two campaigns. But nothing about Arnold Palmer, nothing about the enemy within, nothing about January 6th being a day of love. None of that seems to make it into the Fox News summaries. I wonder why over here.
From Fox News in Washington, we began with some of your top headlines. At least 7 people are dead and 6 critically injured after a crowded ferry dock collapsed on an island off the coast of Georgia Saturday. Many were elderly descendants of slaves who were at an event honoring their ancestors. Israeli forces say they struck Hamas targets in northern Gaza and Hezbollah facilities around Beirut this weekend. Iranian-backed Hezbollah militants fired rockets into northern Israel and launched a drone that came down near Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's holiday home. He was not there at the time. President Trump is set to crisscross Pennsylvania with a number of events today, while Vice President Harris is focusing on battleground Georgia. In a moment, we will talk with governors Wes Moore of Maryland and Glenn Youngkin of Virginia. But first, we've got team coverage on the campaign trail. Alex Hoff with the vice president in Atlanta and Mark Meredith covering President Trump in Pennsylvania. Mark, we start with you. Good morning.
Shannon, good morning to you. Former President Trump is going to be all over Pennsylvania today, determined to gain any momentum he can in this battleground state. And the candidate himself is also pushing back against reports promoted by Democrats, including his opponent, that he's exhausted in this final stretch of the campaign. Overnight, Trump rallying thousands of his supporters in Latrobe, that's outside of Pittsburgh. He told the crowd that he believes voters in Pennsylvania have an ally in him and that he believes they should also send a message to Washington.
So you have to tell Kamala Harris that you've had enough, that you just can't take it anymore. Vice President, Kamala, you're fired. Get the hell out of here. You're fired.
Our latest Fox survey finding Trump leading Vice President Harris overall when it comes to voter preference. But in the battleground states, which will determine this outcome, Harris has the advantage by about 6 points. I mentioned we're going to see Trump at the town hall here where I am, but he's also going to be stopping at a McDonald's somewhere in this state today. Clearly an effort to counter an attack by Vice President Harris. She repeatedly talks about her time working at McDonald's as a young woman, and Trump says he wants to show how it's done. Shannon.
We look forward to the video, Mark. Thank you very much for that report. Joining us now, Alexendria Hoff, live in Atlanta with the other side of the ticket. Hey, Alex.
Hey, Shannon. Yeah, the vice president is welcoming both entertainment and political star power to give her campaign a final boost of enthusiasm. Yesterday afternoon, pop star Lizzo helped at a Get Out the Vote rally that happened in Detroit. And then here in Atlanta, Usher voiced his support for the vice president. At her evening rally here in Atlanta, Harris said this about her competitor's rally style.
Have you noticed he tends to go off script and ramble? And generally, for the life of him, cannot finish a thought. And he has called it the weave. But I think we here will call it nonsense.
Well, Harris did praise Georgia's historic early in-person vote totals. In just 5 days, more than 1.3 million ballots have been accepted. Coming up on Thursday, former President Obama will travel to Georgia to campaign with the vice president for the first time side by side. Former First Lady Michelle Obama will do the same in Michigan next Saturday. And Harris will also be joined by former Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney. That's going to be a series of moderated conversations. Those will take place across Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. Shannon.
Critical states. Alex Hoff reporting from Georgia. Alex, thank you very much. Joining us now, Maryland Governor Wes Moore.
And yeah, I don't have a clip of Governor Wes Moore. I have the closest thing they came to asking about Donald Trump's problems when a quick question at the end they gave to Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin. That will be clip number 8 right after the final news summary I'm about to show you. But yeah, that was pretty biased reporting compared to the other news summaries you saw. Alexendria Hoff showed, there was the clip in her report on Kamala Harris's campaign that, Kamala Harris saying how Trump does these long rambling stories or whatever, but Mark Meredith never reported on the 12-minute anecdote about Arnold Palmer and his penis. That would have been relevant if you really wanted to compare the two campaigns, especially if you're going to show Kamala Harris making that comment. And I noticed also in the editing in Mark Meredith, the report from Mark Meredith on Trump's campaign, they showed Trump first saying, tell Kamala Harris you're not going to take it anymore. And then there was a edit, and then you're fired. And, in between that is when Trump actually said Kamala Harris is a shit vice president, which is, his increasing profanity, possible evidence of dementia disinhibition, of course, the topic of my video. And speaking of dementia disinhibition, I'm going to show you the final news summary. I did promise you that Jake Tapper had said the word penis 5 times, and I think I only showed you 4. I think there were 4 in the Speaker of the House Mike Johnson cross-examination clip I showed you as clip 2. Well, now I'm going to show you Jake Tapper's news summary, State of the Union this week in the thick of it, which is why, in the thick of the campaign. And he does, in just under 2 minutes, does mention the bizarre 12-minute anecdote about Arnold Palmer and the athlete's penis over in this clip.
Hello, I'm Jake Tapper in Washington, where the state of our union is in the thick of it. We're just 16 days from Election Day, and more than 11 million voters have already cast their ballots in what seems likely to be a tight presidential race until the very end. The very last vote has been counted in dueling swing state rallies last night. Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump offered voters sharply different closing messages. Harris kept the focus on Trump, questioning his fitness for office, while in a major speech to the voters of Pennsylvania, Donald Trump went off on a 12-minute tangent about former pro golfer Arnold Palmer, which included this bizarre anecdote about the athlete's penis.
But Arnold Palmer was all man, and I say that in all due respect to women, and I love women. But this is a guy that was all man. When he took showers with the other pros, they came out of there, they said, oh my God, that's unbelievable.
Unbelievable indeed. This to end a week where Mr. Trump called for the military to handle his domestic political opponents, said that infamous Hollywood producer Harvey Weinstein got, quote, schlonged, called Kamala Harris a, quote, shit vice president, canceled scheduled interviews, continued to push lies about the 2020 election, including the notion that January 6th was a government-staged riot, also called January 6th, quote, a day of love, compared the January 6th defendants to Japanese Americans in internment camps during World War II, and at one rally decided to, instead of speak, dance and sway on stage for 39 minutes. Joining us now is the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, who's in...
I don't know, maybe that was the best news summary. I mean, at least in terms of all the, trying to, so many things happen this week where Trump showed his unfitness for the presidency. He does so many things that are so bizarre. And there you got quite a list of the things. And that was the last of the news summaries. You can tell me which one you think was best. Probably either the CNN one or the Face the Nation one. It's hard for me to say. I mean, the Face the Nation one was a lot longer, but Jake Tapper did fit in a lot of the really bizarre things Trump has been doing. The first clip I want to show you is kind of to make up for what was missing from the Fox News Sunday news summary, and basically the entire program. I told you no mention of Arnold Palmer, certainly not his penis on Fox News Sunday. I think this may be the live stream in which I've said the word penis the most. I don't know if I've ever said it in any live stream before, but thanks to Jake Tapper and Donald Trump, I guess this will be the record. But that didn't show up on Fox News Sunday. Arnold Palmer, like I said, I think I only heard the name mentioned once without any real context, just as sort of like a reference to something Trump did on one of the shows. And I watched like several hours of Fox News, several hours. So that didn't make it. The Enemy Within thing didn't make it. The one thing that Shannon Bream did bring up with Glenn Youngkin at the very end of the interview was this former Trump official saying that Trump is unfit for office. She brings it up as like it's Kamala Harris's opinion, where she talks about other people's opinion. So she makes it like a whole thing about opinion, none of the evidence to support why they feel that way, and certainly no follow-up or cross-examination. In fact, she just sits there. You'll see, like, by the end of this answer, I'm like, is she still there? Is Shannon Bream, did she leave the studio? No, but at the end, you'll just see her there smiling. I don't know, almost looks like she might be tearing up because he's giving her just the answer she wanted over in this clip.
To the campaign itself, because that's why this is such a big issue. You have campaigned for President Trump. This week in a sit down with our own Bret Baier, this is what the vice president had to say about President Trump.
Even people who worked for him in the Oval Office, worked with him in the Situation Room, and have said he is unfit and dangerous and should never be president of the United States again.
She cited retired General Mark Milley, who served, of course, in the Trump administration. He is quoted in Bob Woodward's new book saying this. He is the most dangerous person ever, meaning President Trump. I had suspicions when I talked to you about his mental decline and so forth, but now I realize he's a total fascist. He is now the most dangerous person to this country. There are ads with quotes from former Trump staffers, people who served under him, saying similar things. Why should Americans not have some concern if people who worked closest with President Trump are describing him this way?
I think what this whole line of attack on President Trump reflects is the fact that we have a candidate in the Democratic Party who is unable to really convey a future vision for the country and what she's going to do to attack the most important issues. And so what do? They actually have to revert to old adages about what they have been calling him for a long time, which is sadly the lie that he's unfit for office. And the reality, of course, is if they would just focus on what voters are focusing on, which is the economy, the border, national security, and of course, feeling safe in our own country because of the number of illegal immigrants that have come across the border and changed every state into a border state. Shannon, I'm a governor in a state that is purple. It just is. And I travel around the Commonwealth consistently listening to voters. And what I hear over and over and over again is a massive concern about their economic future, their ability to afford groceries and gas and tuition and to buy a home or make their rental payment. What I hear over and over and over again are major concerns about the millions of people who have come across the border and the hundreds of thousands of violent criminals that have come across the border, just identified 2 weeks ago by senior ICE officials. And what I also hear is major concerns about safety. And these are the topics that President Trump is talking about. And the reason why the other side can't talk about them and they want to distract everyone is because they have demonstrated over the last 3.5 years they don't have any answers. They've unleashed unprecedented inflation that has been a gut punch every time anybody walks into a grocery store. They've allowed millions upon millions of illegal immigrants to come across the border and turn every state into a border state. And what's happened around the world is just a representation of a weak presidency, a weak vice presidency, and a weak America. Americans and Virginians want strength back in the White House, and they want someone who will stand for a strong economy and build one that lifts up all Americans like we had before. High growth, low inflation, not low growth and high inflation, where people can get great jobs and manufacturing comes back to the United States. This is the future that Virginians and Americans are talking to me about, and that's why we see President Trump surging in the polls around the country.
Well, the message about what to accomplish sounds very much like the one that Governor Moore gave us as well. So we will see which one is more convincing to voters as they have been voting and they continue to head to the polls ahead of November 5th. Governor, thanks for your time.
Shannon, thank you for having me. God bless you.
You too.
Wait, did somebody sneeze at the end there? No. Anyway, I think I pretty much pre-criticized that clip. Chong is like right by the camera there. Is he going to knock over the camera? No. I have an external camera there and hold on 1 second. Okay. Didn't want the camera to get knocked over. It's Chong again. Hello, Chongy boy. I pretty much pre-criticized that clip, and yeah, it was, the question itself that Shannon Bream asked there was like, that was the kind of question a journalist might ask. The question itself was okay, but then let him talk and no follow-up, nothing about like some of the things that worried people who worked with Trump, some of the other things that Trump supposedly said to John Kelly about veterans and those killed in World War I and, the suckers and losers thing. That's so many things that could have been follow-up, but just like a whole bunch of listening and a God bless you at the end. That part's not really journalism, I don't think. But I'm going to move on now to the next clip. This one I promised you earlier. This is Senator Lindsey Graham being asked basically the same thing about the Mark Milley quote and other Republicans who aren't supporting Trump, who know him and think that he's a threat and unfit for office. And Senator Lindsey Graham responds by getting irate, by yelling, well, you can see it for yourself with Kristen Welker on NBC News' Meet the Press yesterday over here.
Tell you what retired four-star General Mark Milley, someone who you have praised in the past, has had to say about Donald Trump. Of course, he's Donald Trump's former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He told Bob Woodward in a new book, quote, "No one has ever been as dangerous to this country as Donald Trump. Now I realize he's a total fascist, a fascist to the core. Why shouldn't voters trust Donald Trump's top general on this, Senator?"
He has a right to his opinion, but this is the man who oversaw 20 years of training of the Afghan-Iraqi army that folded like a cheap suit. I like General Milley, but I disagree with him. You know what I fear? I fear 4 more years of Biden-Harris policy. I fear holding Israel back so they can't win the war they have to win to survive. I fear 4 more years of holding Ukraine back, 4 more years of broken borders, 4 more years of not drilling for oil and gas, 4 more years of high food prices. The threat to the world is the policies of this administration. To General Milley, you have a right to your opinion, but I don't fear Donald Trump. I fear what's going on in the world today. If you want the world to stay on fire, vote for her. If you want to keep paying high prices for everything it costs to live, vote for her.
But Senator, but you've known General Milley for years. You've said you have deep admiration and total confidence.
I think he's wrong.
John Kelly, his former chief of staff, has said that former President Trump was telling him to go after his opponents repeatedly. Here he was always telling me that we need to use the FBI and IRS to go after people. It was
these
constant
are
and
Democratic
obsessive.
Talking points. I think they're wrong.
He's the former chief of staff.
I think they're wrong. I think they're totally wrong. It was Joe Biden who got us out of Afghanistan that led to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. It was Kamala Harris, the border czar, that opened up our border to 10 million illegal immigrants running wild, women getting raped and killed, terrorists residing in our backyard. It was their decision to stop energy production, making us more energy independent. It was their decision to abandon Israel at their time of need when it came to weapons.
Senator, the U.S. is making more energy than
I
any
think
point.
these generals are wrong.
They worked for Donald Trump.
You know what? I know,
they worked for former President Trump. These are former Trump administration
to every Republican
officials.
supporting her, what the hell are you doing? You're supporting the most radical nominee in the history of American politics. The Green New Deal, Medicare for all. She was the last person in the room before Biden decided to withdraw from Afghanistan. She was the border czar. She cast the tie-breaking vote for the Inflation Reduction Act that gives you high prices. What are you doing? You're trying to convince me that Donald Trump's rhetoric is the danger to this country. The danger to this country is the policies of Biden and Harris. Her fingerprints are all over this disaster, and I can't take 4 more years of this crap.
All right.
When you support her, you're supporting 4 more years of garbage policy.
Senator, we got a lot more to get through, so let me keep moving. I want to ask you about
what the hell are you doing as a Republican blessing this stuff?
I want to ask you about January 6th.
So, yeah, then she moves on to January 6th. I mean, that was a better follow-up from Kristen Welker with the whole John Kelly quote about how Trump's former chief of staff saying that Trump was always asking him to go after people with the FBI and the IRS, and so he had to be like a gatekeeper and make sure that Trump didn't, go off the rail. Though now with the U.S. Supreme Court immunity decision, that's not like even illegal anymore, which is one of the scary things, and that is actually something that Martha Raddatz should have brought up with Chris Sununu in this next clip where she's asking him about Trump saying he's going to go after the enemy within, who he says is Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff. And John Sununu says this thing that I often hear Republicans say, which is false, that, well, Trump was president for 4 years. He never tried to weaponize the government against his political opponents. Well, you just saw the John Kelly quote that he was always trying to get him to get the FBI and the IRS to go after his political opponents. We know he tried to get his Attorney General Bill Barr to arrest Biden in the last couple weeks before the 2020 election, that he also tried to get 2 different attorney generals to go after and lock up Hillary Clinton. You know, they often hear Republicans say, oh, he, never locked her up after saying lock her up. Well, he tried to get his attorney generals to do it, and they said they didn't have the evidence. There was like no way to do it. And of course, what he did to Michael Cohen, he sent Michael Cohen back to prison for writing a book, just for exercising his First Amendment rights to write a book. But it was critical of Trump. So after he got out of prison, he had the Bureau of Prisons send him back to prison so there are so many different, and that's not even talking about the pardon power that he used to help people. It's not just going after his political opponents, it's immunizing his political allies with the pardon power. It's really bad stuff, and no follow-up from Martha Raddatz when Chris Sununu tries to pull that old wrong talking point over here.
Governor, I want to go back to some of the comments that former President Trump has made, threatening to put his enemies within, having the National Guard or even the military take care of them. You say that's all hyperbole and smile, but those things have real consequences. There are people who've been threatened at FEMA and elsewhere over comments that the president and J.D. Vance have made. Does that give you pause ever as you still continue to support Donald Trump?
Again, I think you should give everyone pause. Nobody likes that type of stuff and that type of hyperbole. But let's look. He was president for 4 years. Did he go after his political enemies? Did he weaponize the Department of Justice and go after Hillary Clinton? He said, remember when he said, we're going to lock her up, lock her up? Of course he didn't do that, right? He's trying to get his base riled up. And
so what should his supporters believe? What should his supporters believe? You think this is hyperbole, but what he's saying now, they should believe all that, what he's going to do about the border, what he's going to do about the economy, that's where you draw the line? We just got a very short time here.
So no, what he's saying is I'm a fighter. I'm always going to fight. I'm never going to lay down, not just for himself personally, but for other Americans. And that's why other Americans galvanize to that. They connect with it on a fiery level. They want a fighter, someone who's going to stand up. Now, again, I don't think he's going to go and weaponize. He didn't do it the first term. He's not going to necessarily do it this term. But he's making a point that we want leaders that are fighters and stand up for their fellow Americans.
Okay, thanks for joining us this morning, Governor. We really appreciate your time.
You bet.
The roundtable's up next, breaking down.
So yeah, you saw there that Chris Sununu a couple times made that false claim that Trump never tried to weaponize the government against his political opponents in his first term. He even mentioned Hillary Clinton did not get locked up, but that's because he couldn't get his attorney general to do it. If he wanted them to, and you saw John Kelly, his chief of staff, say he wanted political. Well, I pretty much said all that. I did say all that before I showed the clip. Martha Raddatz, for some reason, didn't say any of it, which is my criticism of her cross-examination of Chris Sununu there. Margaret Brennan is talking about the same issue, the enemy within comment, how Trump is claiming his political opponents, the Democrats in Congress, are the enemy within. But she asked the question in a really weird way to Representative Mike Lawler, this Republican from a swing district in New York. So he has to be really moderate, centrist. He promotes, earlier in the interview, he promoted himself as, bipartisan, working across the aisle. And so the question that Margaret Brennan asks is, well, how can you work across the aisle when the head of your party says that the people across the aisle are the enemy within? Which kind of misses the point of what the problem is with Trump saying that. But I'll talk about that a little more after you watch that penultimate newsmaker clip together over here.
I want to follow up on something you just said, because you are perceived, certainly here in Washington, as a moderate Republican who is willing to reach across the aisle. In a Fox town hall this past week, Donald Trump said the enemy inside the United States is more dangerous than China, Russia, and other countries. Take a listen.
It is the enemy from within, and they're very dangerous. They're Marxists and communists and fascists, and they're sick. I use a guy like Adam Schiff because they made up the Russia hoax. We have China, we have Russia, we have all these countries. If you have a smart president, they can all be handled. The more difficult are, the Pelosi's, these people, they're so sick and they're so evil.
The leader of your party and potentially the next president of the United States says that Democrats are more dangerous than nuclear Russia, than China. If you're reelected, how is it possible that you would be able to reach across the aisle and work with Democrats?
Well, I've done it. I've been praised by President Biden as somebody who he can work with, somebody who can reach across the aisle and address the challenges that we're facing as a country.
But in a
I am
Trump
a member of the problem solvers. Some of my closest colleagues in Washington have been Josh Gottheimer, Richie Torres, Jared Moskowitz. Look, at the end of the day, the American people are going to decide in 16 days who the next president is going to be and who controls Congress. I have proven in this Congress, in a divided government, that I can work across the aisle to get things done. And I will say this, when you look around at the challenges facing the United States, the greatest threat is the unholy alliance between China, Russia, and Iran, and the work they are doing to undermine and destabilize the United States, Israel, Europe, and the free world. That is the threat that I have been focused on in Congress. It's why I passed the Special Envoy for the Abraham Accords Act, why I passed the SHIP Act and the Iran-China Energy Sanctions Act to take on that illicit oil trade between China and Iran that is funding terrorism, that is funding Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and other terrorist networks in the region, and why Israel is under constant threat.
Well, but you would then, I assume in your answer, be disputing the idea that Democrats are so sick and so evil that they're worse than Russia and China. That seems to be what you're saying. But look, doesn't
I
rhetoric
that,
like
Margaret,
that feed into the divisions that our adversaries are exploiting?
Well, there's no question that our adversaries exploit our divisions. When Democrats say that Donald Trump is a threat to democracy, that Republicans are part of a fascist movement, that undermines us as well. All of the rhetoric needs to stop. We need to focus on the threats that are actually facing the United States, which are from China, Russia, and Iran, the crisis at our southern border, in which drug cartels are trafficking women, children, drugs, fentanyl pouring into our country. These are the challenges we need to focus on as an American people and as government officials, and that's my commitment, regardless of the outcome of this election in November.
Before I let you go, you have worked on a bill to try to prevent rogue states from taking Americans hostage.
And I just played that so you saw there was no real follow-up there from Margaret Brennan. It was kind of a weird question, like I said before I showed the clip. And then after at the end of the clip, she let Mike Lawler get away with like the worst kind of both-sidism. The divisive rhetoric hurts when both sides do it. When Trump says fascist things like my political opponents are the enemy within, and also when Democrats call out Trump for saying fascist things, which is pretty much what he said. Like, that is pretty much what he said, and like that is not a fair argument where like one side is calling out the other side for, well, anyway, I think that is pretty self-explanatory why that is not a good cross-examination. But now I'm going to show you the final newsmaker clip. It's what I promised you when I showed you that first cross-examination. I promise you, Jake Tapper will not say penis in this cross-examination. The rest of his interview with Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson here, it's all about Trump saying that his political opponents are the enemy within, and Mike Johnson tries to claim, oh, that's not what he means. That's anyway, and Jake Tapper really does a good job of like pinning down what it is exactly that Trump means when he says the enemy within, and then he gets all these like deflecting answers and makes a pretty good joke at the end that I will talk about with you a little more after we watch that final newsmaker clip before I show you the bonus Cheech and Chong the kittens clip at the end, of course. But here's Jake Tapper. This is the best cross-examination clip of the week that does not include the word penis over here.
In multiple interviews this week, Donald Trump repeatedly referred to prominent Democrats and others on the left in the United States, American citizens, as, quote, the enemy from within, unquote. And he suggested as president he would want to use the National Guard or military against them. Let me play some of that for our viewers.
The bigger problem are the people from within. We have some very bad people. We have some sick people, radical left lunatics. And I think they're and it should be very easily handled by, if necessary, by National Guard, or if really necessary, by the military, because they can't let that happen.
One of the first things you did when you joined Congress was to create the Honor and Civility Caucus. Does wanting to use the military against political opponents, would that pass muster with the Civility Caucus?
That's not... Jake, you know that's not what he's talking about there. What he's talking about is marauding gangs of dangerous, violent people who are destroying public property.
He talked about Adam
and
Schiff
threatening
and the Pelosi's.
other American citizens.
He's not talking. I mean, Governor Youngkin tried this with me too. That's not. He was very clear. Let me play, because he was asked about this later on, because Fox always likes to give Donald Trump an opportunity to clean it up, and he always says, "No, I said what I meant." Here's what he said when asked about it the next day.
It is the enemy from within, and they're very dangerous. They're Marxists and communists and fascists, and they're sick. I use a guy like Adam Schiff because they made up the Russia hoax. It took 2 years to solve the problem. Absolutely nothing was done wrong, et cetera, et cetera. They're dangerous for our country. We have China, we have Russia, we have all these countries. If you have a smart president, they can all be handled. The more difficult are, the Pelosi's, these people, they're so sick. And they're so evil.
That's what he's talking about, using the U.S. military against, not marauding gangs of Venezuelan.
Wait a minute.
Adam
Hold on.
Schiff, Nancy Pelosi's husband, Paul. So let me just say, if a Democratic presidential candidate said that you and your wife were evil and that the military should be used against you, I would say that's disgusting.
Well, thank you. And some have said that about us because they don't like my politics. I did not hear President Trump in that clip say he's going to sic the military on Adam Schiff. That's not what he's saying. You got two different clips in two different contexts. What President Trump is talking about is that they have been attacking and maligning him from the day he came down that golden escalator. Everybody knows that's true. In 2015, 2016, that's when this began. He's been the most attacked, maligned political figure in U.S. history. They've tried to kill him twice in the last few months. This is real, and he feels that acutely. And Jake, you would too, if you were under attack like he is all the time, every day. I mean Iran, who has assassination attempts out against him.
But that's not
crazy, dangerous people
Adam
in the
Schiff
country who
and Nancy
get
Pelosi
on
are not
rooftops and
trying
take
to
shots.
assassinate Donald Trump. I mean, there's this conflation of anybody.
They're not, Jake. They're not. But the political attacks have been relentless, and they have been baseless, and they made up the Russian collusion hoax, and they went after him and have been going after him ever since. They tried to impeach him twice. I mean, they've done real damage in the American psyche. What I'm talking about is the political attacks that are so over the top. Kamala Harris has used language saying he's so dangerous to the country. I mean, I've had colleagues in the House say he must be eliminated. He must be extinguished.
He's literally talking about
this stuff is over the top.
You know, against Democrats. I mean, he's literally talking.
No, he's not. No,
yes, he is.
No, he's not, Jake. No, he's not. No, he's talking about using the National Guard and the military to keep the peace in our streets. In the summer of 2020, that my Democrat colleagues call the summer of love, it was crazy. It was mayhem, and Democratic progressive mayors and governors allowed it to go on, including Tim Walz, who allowed Minneapolis to burn, and it's still not rebuilt. Look, Trump is talking about restoring law and order, and I'm telling you, you can mock it. People in the media can mock it, but that resonates with the American people. They are sick of being afraid on the streets of their cities. Donald Trump can bring order back to the chaos. They know that. So they're willing to give a little on his, social media posts and some fun language he uses at rallies.
He called January 6th a day of love. He said that the January 6th criminals, the prisoners who violently attacked your place of work, he compared them to the victims of Japanese internment camps. And that guy is in favor of law and order?
Yes, President Trump had and kept law and order. When he says at the campaign rallies that
Except on
we
January
didn't
6th.
have hot wars around the globe during his administration. No, look, he's right. Russia did not invade Ukraine under his watch. Israel was not attacked viciously by Iran and its proxies because they were afraid to do so under that commander-in-chief, under President Trump. They're not afraid right now. our allies are nervous, our enemies are empowered because they see an opportunity. The only person that they fear less, our enemies abroad, the only person they fear less than Joe Biden is Kamala Harris. At the end of the day, when you go into the ballot box, I would just encourage everybody, ask yourself quietly, are you comfortable with Kamala Harris being the commander-in-chief of the U.S. Armed Forces at the most dangerous moment since World War II? She could not handle that. Our enemies would have an opportunity there, and people think about those things, and that's why they're going to vote for Donald Trump.
It's like
that's why
you
he's
were
going to win and be reelected president.
answering questions from a completely different interviewer. Yeah. But Speaker Johnson, I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much, and best of luck on the campaign trail in these last 16 days. I hope it is a peaceful and successful election, and that all the ballots from legal voters are counted, and that the actual winner takes office. That would be fantastic. Good to see you, Speaker Johnson.
You too, my friend. Thanks so much.
Yeah, I like that. It's like you are answering questions from a completely different interviewer. But that was actually a really good cross-examination. Jake Tapper was in top form there, as well as in the previous clip I showed about the Arnold Palmer story. But I like the part also when he's like, I think he was telling about Venezuelan drug gangs. Nope. Glenn Youngkin tried this with me, and I'm not going to let you get away with it either. That's why, I don't know. Maybe that was, which cross-examination of Speaker of the House Mike Johnson was better? Which one do you think? The one I showed here at the end, or the one at the beginning about the whole Arnold Palmer fiasco? Well, you can let me know what you think in the comments section. I appreciate all the live viewers who showed up this week, more than usual, which is always nice. And let me know if you're a recorded show viewer who made it all the way here to the bonus Cheech and Chong, the kittens clip, which I have for you. This was something I recorded earlier. Is this? This is not good. I think it got turned. It should be, hold on a second. You kind of saw the clip there, but I've rotated it for the bonus Cheech and Chong, the kittens clip. I think there's some muse in here, and I think I turned it so it's right side up over here. Okay, well, that got a little bit screwed up, but I think you get the idea. Well, not the best Cheech and Chong, the kittens clip, and when I was rotating it, I think I cut off Cheech's head there, but you did get to see the extreme close-up of Chong at the beginning, and then the rest of the clip, he was right behind me purring, so you could hear that too. But anyway, that's the program. I hope you appreciate the time and effort I put into picking out all of these clips, adding my media criticism and political commentary. I'll keep doing this next Monday and every Monday all the way through January 2025, just a few more months now, when we figure out if the person who gets inaugurated on January 20th is the same person who gets elected on November 5th. You never know. It's a big suspenseful election, totally tied in all 7 battleground states within the margin of error. Who knows what's going to happen even after the votes are counted. Trump, if he loses, certainly isn't going to admit losing. So there's that whole possible scenario. And I'll be covering it just a couple more, 2 more Monday media mix-ups before the election, and then several after. If I have some other reason to upload a video, maybe I'll do it during the week. If you want to see my latest edited produced video, there's a link right under the video. The first link is to this video I made about some of my local activism. It has kind of a funny twist. I recommend watching that if you haven't watched it already. until next Monday, or until I have some other reason to upload a video, I guess I'll be seeing all of you around the internet.